So one of the other books I've read recently is Johann and Wolfgang von Goethe's Faust Part 1. For those who are unfamiliar with him, I was very unfamiliar with him actually personally, but I kept reading his name everywhere from the other readings I was doing. He just kept getting referenced. I didn't really want to read it because I'm not very good at reading plays. But Schopenhauer talked about him constantly. Carl Jung talked about him constantly. Nietzsche talks about him once in a while constantly. So it's like I keep reading his name come out everywhere in all my things, so I thought, might as well. I'll just read it. I'll read it. I'm not very good at reading plays, but I thought I'll just read it. I've never properly read a full Shakespearean play, for example. I just don't like reading plays very much. But I checked it out, part 1. Jung, for example, found him very influential in his life because I think one of the things maybe it was partly, there's one line in the book where he talks about him being split into two halves. I think it's like a heavenly and a like a heaven and hell, I think, or so, I forgot what it was actually, but he was like split into two halves. They're like two selves that he was functioning as, and I think Jung felt he resonated with that idea a lot because he also found that his childhood and his young adulthood seemed to be split into two selves. That he seemed to have two versions of himself that was projected into the world, and also within his own mind. So I find that he loved Goethe for really exposing that part of the psyche, and he's very influenced by Faust in terms of how he extrapolates into thinking about human psychology. It's a very influential guy. Schopenhauer mentions him a lot as well. And again, I just said, I'll finally read the guy. So I read the play, and I guess it's in some ways a reversal of the Book of Job. So if you're familiar at all with the Book of Job, the premise is kind of like a reversal of sorts, but not really. It opens up with God engaging with a bet with the devil, or the devil having a bet with God. Just as that God loves to seem to bet on the mortality of his creatures. He likes to gamble or something. I don't know, but he says yes to this bet with the devil about whether or not the devil can kind of tempt one of his creatures into his side to get into his become evil essentially. But Faust, God says, yeah, sure, whatever. While they're on Earth, you can do whatever you want with them. I don't care. He kind of says that actually. So, Dr. Faust is this guy he's this guy who is extremely smart, intelligent. He is so intelligent, and he's like a professor or something, doctor, but that kind of alienates him and isolates him because he wants to kind of know everything. He wants to know more, but he's just, I guess with a lot of knowledge comes a sense of realization that you just don't know enough about the world, and you just end up, cowering even further into your abyss of about your abyss of ignorance. So he's suffering through that, and he finds that he is so convinced that he cannot enjoy life because everything around him, he's just constantly suffering. He has a very pessimistic and negative view of the world, and everything that kind of does, again, everything that happens in his life, he's just suffering. So the devil kind of shows up to his doorstep through like a black poodle, and he says to him, he makes a bet with Faust, saying, well, okay, here, I bet I could give you a transcendent experience of sorts, an experience that will make you feel like, whatever, it'll make you feel good. And you will be able to kind of be in this state of goodness and this good feeling perpetually to some degree. That's how good it'll be. Faust says, yeah, right, you can't do that. I don't buy it. I'm doomed to suffer on this earth. I am 100% sure I will be suffering. So the devil of sorts, Mephistopheles, or Mephisto, he says, okay, well, I will do whatever you want, and I will make you, feel this kind of stuff that you just feel like you've never been able to feel properly. I'll make you feel fulfilled in that way. And if I'm able to actually do it, all you have to do is consign the rest of your soul for after you die, I'll be yours. You'll be mine, I mean. You'll be my slave in hell. And Faust is so proud. He's so proud. He's like, what? Fuck it. I don't think you can do it. I definitely don't think you can do it. So, go ahead. Let's make this bet. And also, don't give a fuck about my afterlife because I don't think he has very much of a sense of believing. He's kind of atheistic. or to some degree, and he just doesn't believe in like the importance of an afterlife. So he says, I don't actually give a shit about where I'll be or who I'll be after I die. So whatever. You can have me after I die, but I don't think you can actually really win this bet. So it's kind of this very odd sense in which, if he wins the bet, just on a wider scale, if you just think about it, if he wins the bet, that means that he would have lived his life in complete suffering. If he, if he loses the bet, after he dies, he'll live a life of complete suffering. But it's weird because he seems to consciously if you prevent good things, if you kind of keep yourself in like the hole of suffering, in like the cycle of suffering, then like what's the I don't want to say what's the point. It's very nihilistic thing to say, but he is a nihilistic character. But the thing is, if you win the bet, your life sucks. If you lose the bet, your life sucks after. It just seemed like a lose-lose situation, but he agrees to the bet, and many things occur. One of the things that kind of is the kind of function, the thrust of the book is that the devil, there's a witch that poisons him into, he not poisons him, but he makes him drink something, and then what he doesn't realize, it seems to be, not sure if it's exactly true. There's a lot of analysis on my part, or in terms of reading the novel, in the play, but it seems to be some kind of love potion. So he takes this love potion and falls in love with the first woman he sees, and the woman is also a creature of tragedy, although her tragedy becomes kind of subjugated to the overall tragedy of the bet that he made, the Faustian tragedy of sorts. So it's interesting. So that's what a lot of the book is about, him and meeting this woman Gretchen, and Gretchen falling in love with him, and him kind of essentially seeing her as an object of someone to kind of sexually conquer, but and him finally having sex with her kind of has a lot of implications in her status in society and all that stuff, and it's essentially she suffers a lot because of his wanting to be with her, or he's falling in love with her causes a lot of suffering for both himself and for her, and it's just a whole bunch of suffering. It's quite a dark play. Some parts of it I didn't quite fully understand the message of, or not necessarily the message, but just some of the example. There's a whole section of the book where he goes, or maybe towards the end, where he goes to these like parties, these like devilish witchery parties of sorts. I don't quite understand their importance. I think he's making lots of references to other things. I think Goethe is making lots of references to Germany at the time, but I just don't fully kind of connect with or understand. I think he may be making a lot of political references to how many people were thinking of seeing how they saw the world and all that stuff. But overall, I enjoyed reading it. It made me think very deeply about many things, just like the last book I read, Mishima's book, did, as well as how Dostoevsky's book... Dostoevsky's also a big fan of Goethe. Faust gets mentioned, I think, in Carbon Punishment, or Faust. But yeah, I liked the play. I enjoyed it. It made me really think about the question of what does it mean to live a life of suffering? What does it mean to want to cease the life of suffering? All that stuff. It's very much going into conversation with my readings on Buddhism and all that stuff. Hinduism. So yeah, very fascinating book. I'm looking forward to reading part 2, but I feel like it might be really worth kind of taking time away from part 2, because Goethe did write that kind of 30 years apart from each other, part 1 and part 2. And yeah, I really enjoyed it. I highly recommend this translation. I'm sure there are other great translations, but this is the one I read, so this is the only one I can really recommend. So yeah, I like the book. Highly recommend checking out. If you like plays, this is something that you just have to read, I think, at some point in your life. And even if you don't like plays, it's quite readable and filled with lots of metaphors, and he writes in a very expressionistic way that is quite entertaining to read. So yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I definitely want to reread it. I'll be rereading it over the next few months to get more out of it. So yeah.